Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into something, well, something fascinating and often hidden. It's a topic that might actually shift how you perceive something really commonplace, something we usually associate with uh, beauty, cleanliness, maybe even luxury. What if those very scents we seek out are actually a silent threat, a danger to our health? We're pulling back the curtain today on what our sources call the fragrant civilization that surrounds us. Okay, so for this deep dive, we've been looking closely at some pretty powerful insights. We've got excerpts from Invisible Toxins, Europe's Fragrant Cancer Trap by Fuchiwu and Junshi, and alongside that, an overview of something called the Air Maze Purifier, Path to Pure Life. So our mission really is to unpack how these seemingly harmless smells, these nice scents, might be contributing to serious health problems long term. And then we want to explore a potential solution that's being proposed. It all starts with the air we breathe, basically. Let's kick off with, a pretty bold claim from the source material. Have you ever wondered why some European countries consistently have some of the highest cancer rates? I mean, the numbers are quite stark. France, top 5 for breast cancer. Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands leading in prostate cancer. And the Nordic countries. Overall cancer rates sometimes 2, even 3 times higher than in Asia. Now, most of us, we probably think, okay, diet, genetics, maybe pollution.
Right, the usual suspects.
Exactly. But the authors, they ask us to focus on something that's almost completely overlooked.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, and maybe a bit jarring, is the core idea in Invisible Toxins.
Mm.
They're suggesting that this whole fragrant civilization, everything from perfumes and essential oils to cleaning sprays, air fresheners, fabric softeners, that this whole world of scent isn't just like a pleasant background noise.
Yeah.
They argue it's a major, often ignored culprit behind these health stats.
Wow.
It really challenges our basic ideas about what's clean or nice, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, because we're so used to liking these smells, even seeking them out. But the authors are clear. It's not just that they smell good. The real issue is how they're made. Our sources say they're not just simple natural things, they're complex mixes, cocktails really, made of hundreds of synthetic chemical substances blended together. And here's the key part. When we breathe them in, they don't just disappear. They quietly seep into every breath. They get deep into our lungs, into the alveoli.
Those tiny air sacs.
Yeah, right, where oxygen gets into your blood. And from there, into the bloodstream, and then, well, everywhere, all through our organs. It's like this silent invasion happening all the time.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, what we're really talking about is a systemic issue. It's chronic, low-level exposure, day in, day out. Think about your body's detox system.
Ah, I'm reading.
It's amazing, right? It's built to handle toxins. But what happens if we're constantly dripping this invisible stream of chemicals into it year after year?
It gets overloaded.
Exactly. Eventually, the system just can't keep up. It gets overwhelmed. So it's not like a sudden poisoning you'd notice immediately. It's more like a slow erosion of health. The authors have this chilling phrase for it: a chronic poisoning civilization under the scent of roses.
Oh.
It's this gradual buildup that has these huge long-term effects, often hidden behind things we actually find pleasant.
Which leads us straight into this really interesting concept the authors talk about, the air blind spot. It sounds almost psychological, doesn't it?
It kind of is.
People genuinely like scents. They connect them with freshness or cleanliness or maybe even their identity, luxury, but they're almost totally unaware of what's actually in those fragrances chemically and what they might be doing to us physically. We trust our noses, but maybe our noses aren't telling the whole story here.
Precisely. And when you actually look at what's inside these common products, it's quite eye-opening. The sources break it down. One bottle of perfume equals hundreds of synthetic compounds, plus alcohol and enhancers.
Hundreds in one bottle.
Yeah. And it's not just some harmless mist floating off. Every single spray, they say, releases tens of millions of microparticles and aerosols right into the air you're breathing.
Tens of millions.
These aren't just smells, they're actual physical things.
Yeah.
Microscopic chemical particles, you could say, being released all around us, constantly.
And the buildup effect from this long-term exposure, it's kind of staggering when you think about it. Your home, your car, your office, these places can slowly turn into what the authors call microtoxic environments. But it goes way beyond our personal spaces too, right? Think about all the commercial places we go into. High-end hotels, boutiques, medical aesthetic clinics, and gyms.
Places that often have that signature scent.
Exactly. They actively create these brand fragrances, thinking it improves the experience. But from the perspective of our sources, these places basically become VOC experimental chambers.
Especially for employees or people who are there all the time.
Right. And the authors really hammer this point home. This is not an odor problem, but a poisoning problem. That distinction is crucial.
Yeah, it really underlines how these chronic toxins work. It's insidious. They're not like acute poisons where you see the effects right away.
Yeah.
No dramatic symptoms. Instead, they work slowly. They accelerate aging and mutation over long periods.
Accelerate aging.
And the sources introduce this really critical idea, the toxin saturation point. That's the moment, the tipping point, where your body's systems are just overwhelmed by all this accumulated stuff. And that's when you start to see accelerated human functional decline, immune collapse, and genetic mutation.
So like a bucket overflowing?
Kind of, yeah. Imagine your body's bucket slowly filling with these compounds, drop by drop. The saturation point is when it finally overflows. And that's when the serious, noticeable health decline really kicks in. But because it's so slow, it's incredibly hard to connect the dots back to the cause.
Okay, so what does this slow buildup, this overflowing bucket, actually do to your body? Our sources list some specific physiological effects of these VOCs, the volatile organic compounds in everyday fragrances. They can mess with your endocrine system. That's like your body's hormone control center, right? Affecting everything from metabolism to mood, reproduction.
Absolutely critical system.
Then they can trigger immune allergies, make you more sensitive to things in the environment. They also promote nasty free radical reactions, basically damage at the cellular level. Accelerates aging.
Oxidative stress.
And maybe the scariest part, they can even get past the blood-brain barrier, that protective shield around your brain.
Yeah, potentially affecting neurological stability, mood, cognition.
These are fundamental systems being chipped away at day after day.
And the way these effects show up is often just tragically mistaken for other things, or just getting older. We're talking things like premature insomnia, trouble sleeping, chronic fatigue you just can't shake, persistent depression, maybe unexplained hormonal issues, things people suffer with for years.
Things that doctors sometimes struggle to diagnose.
Exactly. And ultimately, this constant exposure can be a contributing factor to more severe conditions, like various cancers. But the person suffering often never identifies the real underlying cause, because the threat is invisible, it's gradual, and it's tied to things we actually enjoy smelling. It's really a silent crisis.
It's genuinely alarming when you think about the scale of this invisible exposure, just everywhere. But to really get why it's so embedded, it helps to look back a bit at the history.
Yeah.
Europe's perfume culture, the one we often admire, associate with sophistication. It actually started from something very different, a necessity, really, back in the Middle Ages.
Right, not so glamorous back then.
Not at all. It was mostly about masking body odor because, well, hygiene and running water weren't exactly widespread.
So perfume was basically a practical fix for a pretty unsanitary situation.
Yeah.
A long way from the sort of aesthetic thing it is now. Yeah. And that's exactly where the historical trap was laid, according to the authors.
Yeah.
This practical solution just sort of evolved. It went beyond just masking odors. It became scent aesthetics, olfactory taste, even things like essential oil therapy, which is huge now.
Right.
And in doing that, it inadvertently, almost innocently, locked a whole population into what the sources call a fate of scent obsession and chronic poisoning. They're very clear, though. This is not Europe's fault, but a historical trap.
Interesting distinction.
Yeah. And they stress that only by thoroughly recognizing it can we achieve self-rescue and detoxification. It's about bringing this unconscious, deeply rooted cultural habit into the light, because it's had these unforeseen health consequences.
Okay, so given this pretty alarming picture, this deep-seated problem, what's the way out? Is there a path forward? Our sources introduce a potential solution, something called the air maze purification system. It was developed by Fuqi Wu, who's the main author of Invisible Toxins. He's also referred to as Jiaozu.
Which signifies, like, a master or leader in the field.
Right. And this isn't just an idea on paper. They point to a specific U.S. patent number, US 8268058B2, for a high-efficiency maze-style air treatment device. Plus, apparently there are multiple other patent applications ongoing.
So it suggests a serious effort to create a real, tangible technology. And the promise this system makes is it's pretty ambitious. They claim it can achieve 100% pure, non-toxic new air, specifically air that's dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free, smoke-free, odor-free, and heavy metal-free.
That covers pretty much everything.
It really does. It's designed to completely transform the air quality in your personal space, moving beyond just basic filtering to this really comprehensive multi-stage purification. The goal is to create like an oasis of clean air in a world that's increasingly polluted.
So how does it actually do that? How does this air maze system get to that level of purity? The authors lay out a unique 5-step process. It starts, step 1, with negative ionization combined with a HEPA prefilter.
Okay, so tackling the bigger stuff first.
Right. That first stage blocks things like dust, pollen, those plastic microparticles we hear about. But it also starts working on the VOCs and toxic gases. Then step 2, the air goes through a secondary ionization. This isn't just repeating step 1. It's specifically aimed at neutralizing pathogens, bacteria, viruses.
Ah, okay.
And it also further breaks down those tricky chemical toxins we've been talking about.
Okay, but the really clever part, the sort of novel engineering, seems to come next. In step 3, the air moves into something called the electrostatic dust collection maze box, which the authors give this really evocative name, a sacrificial black box.
Sacrificial? Why?
Because it's designed to permanently trap the really ultrafine pollutants. It essentially takes the hit, absorbing these harmful particles so they're out of the air for good. It's not just a filter you swap out. It's described as a dedicated trap for the most dangerous stuff.
That is fascinating, a sacrificial black box. Okay, and then step 4 introduces the maze effect. So here, the air isn't just being filtered, it's physically forced through these sharp, complex turns like a maze.
Making it hard for things to get through.
Exactly. This intense twisting and turning makes even the tiniest nanotoxins collide with the maze walls and get absorbed. It ensures almost nothing slips past. And then finally, step 5. After all that, after being ionized, filtered, trapped, and run through the maze, what comes out is supposedly 100% pure, non-toxic new air, ready to breathe.
And this whole sophisticated setup, it's specifically targeted at the exact kinds of pollutants that are the focus of invisible toxins. It's engineered to remove those perfume and essential oil residual aerosols, those common household VOCs from cleaners, paints, glues, building materials, all that stuff.
Right, the everyday chemicals.
And even those persistent spatial fragrances and aromatic particles you find in hotels, shops, gyms. It's basically an engineered countermeasure to the invisible components of this fragrant civilization.
And the benefit they propose is pretty profound. The sources suggest that just by spending around 12 hours a day in air purified by this system, you can effectively stop the accumulation of toxins in your body, just halt the process.
Giving your body a break, essentially.
Exactly, a crucial break.
Yeah.
And that allows your body to gradually restore its detoxification and repair capabilities.
Yeah.
It offers a real chance to not just stop the damage, but potentially reverse the invisible harm caused by fragrances.
Wow.
It's about giving your body the clean environment it needs to start healing itself.
The source material sums it up in this really powerful, almost poetic way. It says, the true culprit is not perfume, but our ignorance and obsession with scent.
Ignorance and obsession.
Yeah, and the authors use this really striking, maybe even provocative image near the end. They say, European civilization brought beautiful scents, but unknowingly killed millions of innocent bodies with roses.
That's incredibly strong language.
It is, but what's fascinating and maybe challenging is realizing how deep this issue runs, how tied it is to our culture or daily habits. It makes it hard to even see it as a problem, let alone tackle it.
So, listening to all this, what does it mean for you?
For us, I think it really comes down to recognizing the truth behind the scents that fill our world. It's about using this knowledge not necessarily to live in fear of fragrance, but to make more conscious choices. Choices about the air we breathe, the products we bring into our homes, our personal spaces.
Taking some responsibility back.
Yeah, exactly. Taking responsibility for our immediate environment and ultimately for our health. And the source leaves us with this really profound final thought. It kind of sticks with you. It says, you should not have fragrance on you, but the breath of health.
The breath of health.
It's a powerful call, isn't it? To maybe rethink our priorities, trading that sort of superficial appeal of scent for something much more fundamental, genuine well-being.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden side of fragrance and a potential path towards truly pure air. It certainly gives you a lot to think about regarding the air quality in your own life, maybe encouragement to just breathe a little more consciously from now on. Until next time, stay curious.